So here we go. I'm going to tell you this story. This is a true story. That there were these 12-year-old schoolgirls in Washington who were putting lipstick on their lips, then applying their lips to the bathroom mirror. And after several administrative appeals to stop the practice didn't work, the principal took the girls into the bathroom, and here's how the story ends. To demonstrate how difficult it had been to clean the mirrors, the principal asked the maintenance man to show the girls how much effort was required. So he took out a long-handled squeegee, he dipped it in the toilet, and then he cleaned the mirror with it. And since then, there have been no lip prints on that mirror anymore. You see, there are there's teachers and then there's educators, right? And so I'd like this session to be educational, so please, if you have questions, I'm safe. I'm easy that way. So just ask away, and I think we'll have more fun if we can go back and forth with each other. Let me start by saying this in 1 Timothy 3:1. Paul says this: "Here's a trustworthy saying: if anyone sets his heart on being an overseer, he desires a noble task." One of the things that I tell pastors all the time when we work with them in mentoring relationships or consulting relationships is how much I respect what they do. I really respect what pastors do for a living. Pastoring could be one of the toughest calls on anybody's life, and I truly believe that. Pastoring has become super complex. I was telling Doug that, is that okay if I call you Doug in front of the students? Okay, I just thought about that. Maybe I should be calling you Dr. Graham. Okay.
Call me Dr. Graham.
Okay. But pastoring has become increasingly complex. And I'm learning this all over again. We launched our campus in September, and I'm learning real quick how much more complex it is to pastor today than it was 20, 25 years ago. Do you know that according to Barna, churchgoers expect their pastor to juggle an average of 16 major tasks? Think about that for a minute. If you had a job and your job had 16 major components to it that you had to be skillful at in order to be successful. I worked in the corporate world 20 years. I never saw a job description that looked like that. And so if we lead without a clear set of biblical leadership values, we're going to be frustrated as leaders because people will have expectations of us that are just crazy. Now, there are as many leadership styles as there are temperaments. It's not one size fits all, but the Bible gives us a foundational approach to leadership that I think can be applied no matter what your temperament is. And I believe this, that the biblical model promotes health. It promotes health. It helps us understand really what our non-negotiables are and what tasks we can delegate and should be delegated. When I visit a church, I always look at the bulletin, and within a minute, I can tell if it's a pastor-centric church or not. You know how I know that? Open up the bulletin. Pastoral visit, pastor, if you need a hospital visit, call pastor. Pastor's leading the Bible study on Wednesday night. Pastor leads worship. Pastor does announcements. Pastor does house visits. And it's like, okay, your church is going to be 40 people the rest of your life because nobody can do it all. Nobody can take on that much responsibility and grow their church. So in the New Testament epistles, predominantly those Paul wrote to Timothy and Titus, there's a model that I'd like to propose to you today. And I'm only going to give you, out of this, I'm only going to give you 5 priorities of every pastor. So I've already cut your work in 2/3, not 16, just 5. Here we go. Here's the first one. The pastor's relationship with God comes first. And you might be thinking, well, duh, right? But listen, there's a difference between knowing something and doing it. And you can know that it's a priority and not make it a priority, right? In 2 Timothy 1, chapter 1, verse 5, Paul wrote these words to Timothy, I've been reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives also in you. There was a study done in 2007 by Francis Schaeffer Institute, and it was looking at a variety of pastoral realities, and one of the things that they were looking at is what was the devotional life of pastors like. And they learned that for 70% of pastors, the only time they get in the Word is when they're preparing messages. It's not good. Look, if we're not careful, the work of the ministry can get in the way of our relationship with God. You can be passionate about ministry and not be passionate about Jesus. Don't forget why you signed up in the first place. I signed up for the ministry because God got a hold of my life at age 16 and did a dramatic change. I signed up for the ministry because I love Jesus. In John 15:5, Jesus said this, apart from me, you can do nothing. You believe that? It's really true. I find myself praying this way often. God, I can't do this without you, and Lord, I don't want to do this without you. I prayed that prayer before I came onto the stage this morning. God, I don't want to do this without you today. I don't want to. I know I can't. I don't even want to try. Your first priority is your relationship. You know, there's an author named Paul David Tripp. If you haven't heard of him, you got to pick up some of his stuff. It's really good. He writes this. He says, a pastor's ministry is never just shaped by his knowledge, experience, and skill. It's also shaped by the condition of his heart. In fact, if his heart is not in the right place, all of the knowledge and skill can actually function to make him dangerous. Wow. The heart is the inescapable X factor in ministry. You know, if you've got it all up here, but you don't have it in here, you can be dangerous. You could do a ton of damage to people. So the first priority of every pastor, according to the biblical model, is placing a premium on developing our relationship with God. Look, ministry can go to your head. It can go to my head. We're having our best year ever at Converge Coaching this year. So it's just having a banner year. It's been an amazing year for us. And if I don't spend time with God every morning and spend time in His Word, I can get a big head and start taking credit for it. I don't want you to do that either. So, make sense? Yeah. Priority 1, develop your relationship with God. Here's the next one. And that is, the pastor has to make some tough calls. You have to make some tough calls as a leader. Now this part is true whether you're in pastoral ministry or whether you're leading a business, a team at work, leading your family. I mean, this is true no matter what you're doing in terms of leadership. But it is particularly difficult for guys and gals in the ministry to do this because they don't know how to do it. They don't think they should do it. But let me give you an example of a tough call from Paul's letter to Titus. This might interest you. He says this, warn a divisive person once and then warn him a second time. After that, have nothing to do with him. Wow. You may be sure that such a man is warped and sinful. He is self-condemned. That's pretty straightforward, isn't it? Every church I've attended, led, or consulted with has some difficult people in it. But here's the good news, is that normally those difficult people comprise a very small percentage of the population of a church. However, they're very vocal. And what happens sometimes is pastors spend way way, way too much time trying to placate that 4%, and they ignore the other 96% that are on board with them. Bad strategy, not a good use of your time. It's a trap to do it that way. Look, when Paul told Titus, warn him once, warn him again, then after that have nothing to do with them. He wasn't telling Titus to adopt an off with their heads approach. You know, the first time a divisive person spreads poison, off with their head. That's not what he was recommending. But what he was pointing out was the mistake of swinging to the other extreme and putting up with divisive behavior or difficult behavior for too long. See, when a pastor and a leader refuses to make tough calls, the pastor suffers, the church suffers, the organization suffers, and guess what? The person who's divisive suffers. They suffer too. Because how many of you know that behavior is hurting them? That's not good for them. So everybody loses, even the divider loses. Because I'm pretty sure most people who behave that way have never had a leader with enough courage to look them in the eye and say, you cannot do that here. I will not let you spread that. We don't do that. You know, at our church, our home church, if somebody, and this doesn't happen now because we have a reputation, this doesn't happen very much. Somebody says, oh, I want to talk to you about Pastor so-and-so on staff. Time out. We don't do that here. He's my best friend. I'm going to tell him everything you tell me. How many realize that just closes it off, right? And you might think, well, aren't you worried that people are going to think you're a jerk? No. I don't do it nasty. I don't do it angrily. I just say we don't act like that here, and we don't. It's part of our culture. It's part of our DNA as a church. We just don't behave like that. And so let me school you. Let me help you with that. Here's what some pastors tell me. They say, isn't that unloving to confront people like that? I say, nope, it's scriptural. It's scriptural. As a matter of fact, it's one of the kindest and most biblically sound things a pastor can do, is to tell somebody the truth wrapped in love, full of grace. Paul says our conversation should be full of grace, seasoned with salt, not full of salt, seasoned with grace. Right? So when you're having a tough conversation with somebody, when you're making a tough call, it's not a beat-down session. No, you have to be pastoral about it, right? It has to be, that tough conversation has to be enveloped with grace and love. And really the heart of, I want this person to get past this part of their life. I want them to grow up. I want them to develop, because it's keeping them immature. See, avoiding tough calls is not loving. It's not. Some pastors avoid it because they hate those kind of... I haven't met a pastor, myself included, who loves having difficult conversations with people. You know, as a matter of fact, I'd be worried about them if they did. That something was wrong. Oh, I just can't wait. No, I mean, something's wrong with that. See, those kind of conversations sap time and energy, and a lot of times they sleep. So, a loving approach. We're talking about making tough calls and spending a ton of time on this, because this will make your life 10 times better if you get this down. Your life will be so much better. A loving approach addresses that kind of person's behavior in a kind but firm way. And Paul said, look, I don't want you spending too much time paying attention to these folks. 2 times you warn that divisive person. Twice. After that, stop wasting time and energy on a person that he says is warped and sinful. Strong language. Here's what I've learned, that most of the time people who are warped and sinful, who say they're Christians and they're warped and sinful, have no intention of changing until something drastic happens in their life. So 2 warnings, And that's it. You have other people in your life who are on board with you, who need your time, need your attention. When I was a lead pastor back in the 90s, I spent 90% of my time with people who were never going to be faithful. And I thought to myself, oh, this other 90%, you're going to think I'm awful. I've already got them. You know, they're already in the fold. I don't have to worry about them. That was one of the biggest mistakes I ever made as a pastor. One of the stupidest things I ever did was that. Now, I want to stop there for a minute. What are your thoughts on this? Give me some feedback. Sound good? Sound ridiculous? What do you think?
Sounds great, and it sounds almost impossible to do.
Okay, why do you think it's impossible? I'm interested in that.
I'm at a church with 60 people.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell the divisive one to go, she's going to take a chunk of them with.
Okay.
They're divisive too.
Not anymore.
Okay. So when you say chunk, what does that mean? Does that mean 5?
Well,
Does it mean
let's
10?
say I can count the healthy people in the church on one hand.
So they're going to take 55? One person will take 55 people away?
They'll take
Highly unusual.
This is a highly unusual
Yeah.
church.
Yeah. We probably have to take that offline. That's a serious issue.
Yeah.
I think divisiveness is cancer. And it spreads
Well,
spreads like cancer.
I will give you an example.
Okay.
I was
Real
preaching-
quick.
I was preaching on Sunday morning, and I was preaching out of 1 Corinthians 11, and I was talking about how spiritual authority doesn't make anybody special. And one of these divisive people who sits in the back realized I was talking about myself, and she gave a very hearty amen.
Amen to that. Oh, sweet.
So I turned around and faced her, and I said, it doesn't make you special.
You want me to come speak at your church? Maybe not, right? Okay. So, have you had conversations with this person?
Oh, yeah.
How are those conversations going? How do they go normally? Real quick, tell me.
She escalates to yelling and screaming.
Yeah.
Quickly.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm pastoring. I'm a campus pastor of a church of about 100. I just couldn't put up with that. I just couldn't put up with that. I couldn't. And, I'd either leave or I'd be removed by my lead pastor. I'm not going to live my life like that with somebody who's in my face doing that I just can't do it. So it's a tough spot. Rod Loy said something, I don't know if you know who Rod Loy is, but he said something a while back. He said, one Sunday I grew my church by -100. Because he had to have a difficult conversation with the congregation about some stuff. He lost 100 people in one day. Now, he's got a big church, right? But I appreciated what he said, that sometimes you do have to take a step back before you can move forward, right? So you're in a difficult spot. But personally, I won't allow that to happen at our campus. I just won't allow it to happen. And if it happens, I'm dealing with it right up front. I'm gonna deal with it before it spreads. And if 90% of the congregation doesn't want me there, I'm out. I don't want to do that. I'll find some other place to,
Oh, no,
But
they want me here. They just don't want me to chase her away.
well, yeah. Yes.
I just want to make a comment after what you're saying, that in my church we were about 300 members,
Yeah.
and about 90 people left. And I remember seeing my pastor, he was hurt. He said he was hurt because he was hard to take, 90 people.
Yeah.
And
It does hurt.
most of them were leaders
Yeah.
of the church. And then it was hard for me to understand those kind of things.
Sure.
How is that possible? Being a leader, teaching in church. How can that be? And then, but I saw after that, things started to change. A lot of more people came. They
Yeah.
passionate about doing something. And then that made me realize sometimes, like what you just said, like sometimes we need to like step back.
Yeah.
And, like, to move forward.
And I know that sounds simplistic, but I wonder if part of the reason you're at the number you're at is because when people come in, they feel that. They feel it, right?
I used to go to that church. They do.
Okay. So, you know, it's if it's your livelihood especially, it's tough. But I'm of the persuasion, and I'm in the middle of the fight with you, okay, that I will not allow somebody like that to dominate. And if they take 50 people, they take 50 people. God bless them. I'm going to go find 50 people in Washington Township who don't even go to church, and I'll have a ton more success with that 50 than I will this 50 that left or whatever. I'm not telling you how to pastor. All I'm saying is, if it will continue, unless you make a tough call. And I'm not telling you what to do, but it's very difficult. But here's the problem: churches get into trouble like that because no one taught you, as a young pastor, how to deal with this stuff, right?
Yeah, I unfortunately inherited this situation, and yeah.
Right. And you know what? Some folks have been there a long time, and their thought process is, I'll be here longer than you. And you know, in some cases that's true. But yeah, I had a pastor. This is a true story. Pastor I met about a year ago. He wanted to have dinner with his wife and my wife, and so we had dinner together. And first thing out of his mouth was, "There's this gal in church who's bad-mouthing me in front of the congregation." And I said, "Okay, what are you doing about it?" He said, "Nothing." So how long has it been going on? 5 years. Oh, wow. And I said, and I've known this guy for like 2 weeks. And I said, "Are you crazy? Are you crazy? Deal with this person. Make a tough call. She's got to go. If she doesn't listen and say, hey, look, you can't do this. Here's the way you need to handle your frustration. This isn't the right way to handle it. It's not good for you. It's not good for the church. Definitely not good for me. If you're not willing to have that conversation with her, you're not being a good leader." Now, amazingly enough, he wanted to have dinner again after that. But it just gets me mad to see pastors get knocked around by people like this. Go to Titus, man. Paul says 2 times. After that, have nothing to do with them. So, make sure you give me your card. I'll be praying for you, because that's tough. Maybe we can talk offline. Yeah. Okay? I want to keep moving though, because we're going to run out of time here. Is this helpful, guys, so far? Yeah. All right. Here's the third priority of every pastor, and that's raising up and releasing leaders. Raising up and releasing leaders. Paul said this to Timothy: "And the things that you've heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable men who will also be qualified to teach others." Don't you love that verse of Scripture? I love that verse of Scripture. There's 4 layers of leadership there. One of a pastor's primary responsibilities is to scout, develop, and release talented people to serve. The mission that God has called a pastor to is bigger than that one pastor. And it's going to hopefully outlast that pastor. So you and I need to learn how to focus some of our energy and time on developing and releasing leadership. Here's what I believe a measure of success is as a leader. I think a better measure of success is the number of quality leaders that you reproduce and release, not the number of people who attend on Sunday morning. I can give away free Big Macs and have 500 people in my church. Does that mean I'm a good pastor? I don't think so. No, here's what I believe, that in most cases, if you raise up and release leaders, your Sunday morning attendance will grow. It will take care of itself in some ways. You know, I've got 5 ministry team leaders at our campus church. 5. We have great teams. We have, you know, it's a plant, so we have around 100 people, maybe about 70 adults, and out of those 70 adults, 58 are serving in some way, shape, or form. We told people you can't come out here unless you serve. The 12 people that aren't serving are new. They're visitors that have now become regular attenders.
So next week they start.
So we're on them. No, they're on my radar. They're on my radar. But here's what I told my team leads. All I want you to do is 3 things. Just 3 things. I want you to execute your role. Figure out what that role should be, what the outcomes you want. Execute the role. 2, build your team. Grow your team. Scout, recruit, release, talent. And 3, find an apprentice. Those 3 things. Find an apprentice is the 3rd thing. Because if life happens to you and you have to step down, that ministry should just keep going. You know, in Michigan, in the fall, we have beat trucks, big 18-wheeler gravel haulers full of beat trucks. And I tell people in Michigan, if you get run over by a beat truck tomorrow, your ministry should keep functioning except for a few days while we honor your memory, right? So, look, one of your primary priorities as a leader is to raise up and release other leaders. It's one of the more fun things you get to do as a pastor. Here's a 4th one. Preach the word carefully, with love, and without apology. Preach the word carefully, without apology, and with love. You know, when you preach every Sunday, it is very difficult to be interesting every week. It really is. It's a grind. And here's what Paul said to Timothy. He said, do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, who correctly handles the word of truth. And then he says to him a little bit later, in the presence of God and Christ Jesus, who will judge the living and dead, in view of his appearing in his kingdom, I give you this charge: preach the word. Be prepared in season and out of season. Correct, rebuke, and encourage with great patience and careful instruction. So this priority means that we carve out time in our schedule to do proper Bible study and interpretation. Now, how do you do that when it seems like you're constantly in reactive mode? Hard to do, right? When you're firefighting all the time. I want to encourage, here's what I do and what I've done for a long time. Somewhere along the line, I learned the power of blocks of time. So when I was lead pastor in Freeland, Michigan, this was back in the 90s, I would carve out 2 mornings, and usually Tuesday and Wednesday, 4-hour blocks for study, for preparation. No phone calls, no interruptions unless it was my wife or my kids or a true emergency. And guess what? In 15 years of pastoral ministry, my first 15 years, there was two real emergencies in 15 years. 2 genuine emergencies. Now, sometimes people think everything in their life's an emergency, right? And you have to differentiate. Only 2 times in 15 years was there a valid emergency. And I get that when that happens. But I would block off time. And I found my productivity in my preparation going through the roof. Because I was concentrated on one thing for 4 hours. It was amazing how much I got done. And I learned something. I learned something about myself. I'm a morning person. I do my best writing, my best thinking before 1 o'clock. So I'm up early, and I do all the mental heavy lifting early in the morning. Put some blocks together, because every Sunday, when people come to hear you speak, they should get a great meal. They shouldn't get something that you put together on Saturday night. I honestly believe this, that something should have been, you should be working on something several weeks before it ever makes it out to public. Because the first thing that has to happen is that passage of Scripture needs to work on you. And let it work on... The people that I appreciate the most when they preach are people that are saying, you know what, I don't have this all together, I'm figuring this out too. I'm learning. I told you last session, I'm going to be on lifelong maintenance when it comes to mental and emotional health because I don't have it all figured out. I haven't, it's not like I've arrived. It's an ongoing battle. So it is here with preaching. So give that a whirl. See if putting some blocks of time together for study or for really your heavy lifting mentally helps you. And if it doesn't help you, send me a note and say, John, that didn't help me. And then we'll figure out something else for you. But it was extremely helpful for me. Let me give you one more here. Here's the fifth priority of every pastor. He stays in touch with the day-to-day challenges and pressures confronting his people. It is so easy if you're full-time in vocational ministry to forget what it's like to live and work next to heathens. Paul said this to in the book of Acts. Well, we read this story. Actually, he didn't say this. This was written about him. After this, Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all the Jews to leave Rome. Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, that's the word I want to really focus on there, tent maker, as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Here's what I've learned about full-time vocational ministry. It can insulate us from the challenges our people deal with in the marketplace. Being in the marketplace for 20 years has made me a much better preacher, a much more compassionate preacher. If you're a full-time in vocational ministry, you have to intentionally figure out ways to get outside of the church and get in touch with life as your people live it and deal with it. Let me try to describe, if you're not in the marketplace right now, let me try to describe what the marketplace is like today. It's extremely competitive and increasingly vulgar. I have heard tens, hundreds of thousands of F-bombs in 20 years in the corporate world. The language is unbelievably bad. Even from the head honchos. We have CEOs of companies who drop more F-bombs. It's just like, come on. But that's the world your people live in. They're being asked to do more work. One of our leaders, our team leaders, his job, he works for a technology company in Southfield, Michigan, and he has been asked to add more to his plate. He's actually taking on the job of somebody they let go. So, are they paying you any more money? No. How are you going to do that? So, I'm not sure yet. I told him I'd give him 3 months and we'll see how this works. But that's one story. That's multiplied all over the place, right? Companies are letting people go and they're not filling their roles. And so your people are being asked to do more work with no increase in pay. They tend to overcommit. People in your congregation tend to overcommit at work out of fear. They're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of not having enough money. They're afraid of the opinions of their boss or their peers regarding their work ethic. And in compounding their stress, many of them work for knuckleheaded managers. And I worked for a couple of those. It's miserable to work for somebody who's a difficult person. So as best as you can, as a pastor, as a leader, you have to try to understand those realities because it will allow you to shape your ministry approach a little bit differently. It will help you with your preaching. It will help you with your teaching. It will help you with your expectations of what's realistic to expect out of your people. Listen, if they work full time, they're probably working 45 to 50 hours a week in high stress situations, most of them. And then we're asking them to give another, 5, sometimes 10 hours a week, some people. And think about that. I mean, over time, what did we talk about last session, right? And so we have to remember that our folks have this life that's demanding and exhausting many times and stress-filled. And so they're not always going to be able to do everything you want them to do. And you have to be okay with that. Now, I'm not saying sloppy. I'm not saying if somebody commits to something and they don't do it, you don't deal with it. Of course you do. But we need to be realistic about what people can and can't do. Paul found that important. I think one of the beauties of Paul being a tent maker is it really kept him in touch with what people face every day. It made him more compassionate, more understanding. I do believe it also freed him up to say what needed to be said. You know, he had another income coming in, right? So he could say what he needed to say, and if people didn't like it, it was not like Paul was going to starve, right? He had another avenue to go. So you don't have to do 16 things to be a great leader. You just need to do 5. Focus on your relationship with God. Remember why you signed up in the first place. Secondly, don't allow fear to stop you from making tough calls. Third, focus a chunk of your time each week to scouting, developing, and releasing leaders. I schedule time for that. I schedule thinking time into my calendar so I can solve problems. And you think, I'm too busy to do that. I guarantee you, if you spend 1 hour a week with a pad of paper like this, can I grab that for a minute? Go to Panera, go to Starbucks, go somewhere, hide yourself in a corner, and at the top of that, write down a problem that you're trying to solve. And for 1 hour, phones in the car, iPads in the car, computers in the car. It's you and a pencil and a piece of paper. If you'll spend an hour trying to solve a problem, you will be amazed at how productive you can be. I do that, I call it a clarity break. And when I'm trying to solve a problem, I end up filling 3 pages of notes in an hour. Carve out some time to scout, to develop, to release people. Study and prepare so you can correctly handle the word of truth. And stay in touch with life outside the 4 walls. So I really want to challenge you, if you're already in pastoral leadership or if you're not, to step back for a minute and think about the approach that you're using or the approach you've been thinking about using. Now, you may be doing some of these 5 things already, and that's great. Some of them you might not be doing. Here's what I know. It takes time to learn how to function that way, especially if you've been used to being firefighter and a reactionary leader. And give yourself some grace. You're not going to walk out of here today. We spent, 45 minutes talking about this. I'm not an expert at this. You won't be an expert in 45 minutes. But start to work on these areas. Now, some of them may push up in your brain as more important. Work on those first. Work on the one that resonates with you the most. And give yourself some grace. Now, one final question. You might be wondering, why should I care about these 5 things? What difference does it make if I do those things or I don't do those things? Well, if you learn to lead this way, you'll stay healthy. I believe you will. Spiritually healthy, emotionally and relationally healthy. Your church will be better off if you narrow your focus, and really focus on 5 things. You're going to enjoy pastoring or leading more. You'll be more productive, and you'll be able to stay at it longer. So those are all good reasons why to take a long, hard look at these 5 priorities and say, you know what, I'm going to do this because your people won't make those priorities for you. I found this out. If you don't manage that, people will manage it for you. If you don't prioritize time, people will prioritize it for you. If you don't take control of your calendar, people will do it for you. You have to be in charge of that. So those are the reasons why I think it's important. So.